Okay, so good day, everyone. Whatever time it may be, or I guess I should say whatever day it must be that you're watching this. We're gearing up for the final stretch, so uh, I want to remind everyone that all revisions of SA3 problem solution are due by the 5th. Okay, today that I'm recording this is Sunday the 1st, so you have until the 5th. That has been announced up on D2L. Please check D2L for all the latest updates. They're on announcements. They have been all semester. So if you haven't turned anything in for SA3, I need something by the 5th, by November 5th. Okay? If you don't get anything in by then I can't help you. You're not going to get any credit for SA3. Get me something. You know, technically speaking, 1 point is better than 0. Now, if you give me something, you're going to get more than 1 point, but you get the point. Ha ha ha. I've got a few things to go over today, so I'm just going to get right through them. But Essay 4 is your final essay. It's going to be your final essay and your final exam. It is a research-supported argumentative essay. So you do have to do research. I've already got the assignment sheet up. I've already gone over it. You need a bare minimum of 3 outside sources for this. I've already shown you on previous videos how to use the Kauffman Library databases. You don't have to use the databases. I would highly recommend it because if you follow the guide that I gave, that I went over in the video, you can limit it to where you are guaranteeing that your sources are legitimate sources. You can limit it to peer-reviewed academic sources, although I'm not requiring that. However, if you do, then you are guaranteeing that you have legitimate, reliable sources, okay? If you use Google or anything outside of the databases, you are not going to guarantee that you're using what are considered reliable or academic sources. But that doesn't mean they don't exist. They're all over. It's just you have to use your own judgment in that case. If you use the databases, you can pretty much guarantee by checking those boxes that you're using reliable and legitimate sources. Now, just because you're using reliable sources does not mean that those sources are relevant to your topic. Okay, and if they're outdated, that's another thing you have to consider. Consider the date of the material that you're using in accordance with your topic. Okay, just because a source is old doesn't mean it's no longer valuable. It depends a whole lot on what your topic is. If your topic is modern computer science and you're quoting an article of the latest technology from a PC magazine from 1981, that's an outdated source. And it was reliable in 1981, and of course that stuff was cutting edge, but it's no longer in soon to be 2021, late 2020. That's all old technology. So if you are writing an argumentative essay on cutting edge technology and you're talking about technology from the early 80s, you're not really, you see, that's what that would not be relevant as to use it as cutting edge technology. It was cutting edge in 1981. It no longer is. So you just have to use your own judgment in a lot of cases, even if the source is reliable, and you have to make the decision on whether or not it's even relevant to your topic. If you just throw a quote in from some person who's an expert in, I don't know, Euclidean mathematics, and your topic has absolutely nothing to do with that, not even in the farthest stretch of anyone's imagination does it have anything to do with that. You're quoting some reliable source about a topic that is completely irrelevant to your argument. So just the best meter possible is just basic common sense. Does this fit my topic? Does this support my argument? Does it hurt my argument? That's another thing to consider. On rare occasions, I've read research papers where someone was quoting an authority. For some reason, they thought that it was supporting their thesis, but it was actually refuting their thesis, and they weren't addressing opposition. You're supposed to do that, but in this case, this person was using a source that they thought was supporting their argument, and it was actually kind of destroying their argument. And it sunk their whole ship, metaphorically speaking. Their argument was dismantled by this quote that they thought was supporting it. So just make sure that your sources are relevant to your topic, and that they're also functioning the way that you want them to help support your case. So that's just a quick overview of things to consider while you're conducting your research. Now, a couple other things that I want to stress is that for this final essay, you're no longer allowed to use first person. You can't write from the I, me, my perspective. This one has to be third person. And I'm going to go over that for a little bit, and I'll continue to go over third person examples. We will, in the future, probably the next video, I'll go over some exercises on how you can convert first to third person. Second person has not been allowed all semester, yet every single time I get a batch of essays, there's at least 5 or 6 essays that have a whole lot, if not the entire thing, written in the second person. Don't use it. I've said it in plenty of these videos. Don't use second person. It's not good for these types of essays. That doesn't mean that the second person is useless. It has if it's a dialogue, if two people are speaking to each other, they speak in the second person. However, that's not how this particular essay is going to work. There isn't going to be dialogue between you and somebody else. The dialogue is between you and the reader, and you're not directly addressing the reader in this. That's why you're going to write it from the third person. Now, I'm going to show a quick little example here of what I mean by third person and why it's perceived as more advantageous in these research-supported argumentative essays. So I'm going to bring up a real quick couple of slides, and then I'll go over them. So let me go ahead and full screen that. So why should you use the third person objective? And that's the third person that we're talking about. There are different forms of third person that I'm not going to even go into right now because that could just cause confusion. First person implies only what the writer thinks. So it's just the writer's opinion. Second person is direction for the reader by the writer, and again, it can, and I know I've shown this slide before, but I'm showing it again. It can appear either condescending or insulting. It can appear like you're giving instructions like this, when it's unnecessary. If you say something like, you will not enjoy this book, or you will not enjoy this blah 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 movie, you're directing someone. You're telling them what they're going to do or what they're going to think or how they're going to act. And a lot of people get turned off by that. So second person, it shouldn't be used at all. Now, third person appears authoritative. It appears to have a higher level. Now, you can be just as authoritative in first person as you can third, but it depends who that first person is. If your medical doctor tells you that you need to take this, this, and this if you want this to go away or get better, they're a medical doctor, they're an authority, and most people who go seek medical attention are going to listen to the advice of the doctor because the doctor is an authority. Okay, so it appears to be factual when in fact you can lie just as well, if not better, in the third person as you can the first person. But it seems absent of biases and prejudices. Now it can be, but it's not, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the case, you know. And then I've updated this a little bit. So these are visual representations. So third person in a video game would be something like, this is the RE2 remake right here. And then first person would be where you're seeing it through the character's eyes. Now in third person, you're controlling that character from a distance. You're not actively seeing from their perspective. You're seeing it from a third person perspective. So you are literally and figuratively both detached from that character that you're moving around on the screen, however. Now in first person, you're seeing it through that character's eyes. So third person has a more detached and seemingly authoritative viewpoint. And that's really all I need to show from that. Now, it is the prevailing reason why research, most research, the overwhelming majority of research is written in third person, because it does give the appearance of more authority. Now, another thing I want to touch on is formatting. These essays, as all semester, these essays are supposed to be in MLA format, and up to this point, using outside sources was optional. So I've been pretty lenient on internal citations and works cited pages. For this last essay, they have to be correct. This is a research supported argumentative essay, so your sources have to be legitimate sources, and they also have to be cited correctly. This is going to count as a portion of your grade. It's going to be an important portion of your grade. If you've used outside sources in essays 2 or 3, first essay there was no need to. But for essays 2 or 3, for those of you who used outside sources, I would make you aware that, hey, this needs to be like this, or you need to use internal citations here. I didn't count it against your grade. I gave you the chance to correct it. Now you will have the chance, if you get your first drafts in time of essay 4 to me in time, you will get them back with chances, with a good at least a week, if not, I think you're going to have longer than a week to revise it, and I will point out some mistakes, but your formatting is going to be weighed in the final grade on this essay. I've had all kinds of strange formats given to me this semester. It hasn't been a lot, but it's been too much considering how much I've stressed it. It's been way too much for me not to keep going over it. I know some of you who are doing everything right are like, well, I have to keep going over this because so many people are giving me some formats that I don't even know what they are. Some of them don't even have names on them. So I'm going to show you on the D2L homepage right here, okay? For those of you who have questions, now you can call and talk to me, you can email me, you can text me, I will get back to you, I promise you that. But I've had this here all semester under content. Right here. This is step-by-step instructions on how to do MLA format. This is MLA format. This is in MLA format. This is showing you what it looks like, and this text here is explaining how to do it. And I even show how to do internal citations correctly and what a works cited page should look like. So that's all there for you. And that's been there all semester. So if you want a quick reference, use that. And you can also use the OWL from Purdue, and I also go over, let's see, where is it at? Let me go to show all announcements here. We're going to have to go way back because I did this right at the beginning. Okay, so right here, if you go all the way back, this is like right at the beginning of the semester, August 21st. Right here is the MLA instructions again, but then I also go over it on the video here on right here on 8/26. This is a video of me going over how to set everything up. So there's really no, at this point, there's no excuse to not have your papers properly formatted. So that's very important for this final essay. Um, it will be a factor into your grade, where previously, if you just had a few little mistakes, I'd let them go. If you're just giving me something that doesn't even have your name on it, obviously that's a little bit too extreme for me not to take it into heavy consideration. But I want you to be aware of all these resources. Now, another common error that I've been seeing is with subject-verb agreement. So I'm going to bring up this little sheet here, and I'm just going to go over this one at a time. And I've got multiple choice. Now I'm going to explain these as I go through them. The first one is pretty easy, and it's pretty self-explanatory, but what I mean by subject-verb agreement is that your subject and the verb have to agree in tense. For example, if you have a singular subject, then you have to have a singular verb. Now, if you don't know what the subject is, then the verb is, if you have a singular subject and a plural verb, usually it's because the person writing it thinks that something else in the sentence is the subject. Now remember, prepositional phrases cannot have a subject, and that's usually where people make subject-verb agreement errors. So I'm going to go over these and explain to you why they are. Okay, so the frogs at the cottage blank very loudly. They croak very loudly because the subject is frogs. Okay, frogs is plural. Therefore, croak needs to be the verb. Now here, this one is a good example, 2 and 3 here. The horse gallops wildly across the field. Now, I mean, the horses gallop wildly across the field. Horses is plural, so gallop is the plural verb for that. Gallops would be singular, so if I said the horse, if it was only one horse, it would be the horse gallops. But since we have two horses or more, it could be a whole herd of horses. The horses gallop. Now, this next example is what I mean by where you might be confused as to what the subject is because of a prepositional phrase. The herd of horses gallop or gallops wildly across the field. Think about that for a second before I answer it. Because in this example above it, the horses gallop because horses is plural. But what about this one? The herd of horses gallop or gallops wildly across the field. In this case, it's gallops. Why? Because horses is no longer the subject of this sentence. Now, it's easy to think why it would be, but horses is not the subject. The subject is the herd. A herd, although, remember when I went over those collective nouns? Herd is a collective noun. A herd is one unit. It is one entity made up of many things. In this case, animals. In this case, specifically, horses. So the horses are plural, but the herd itself is one entity. So it is treated as singular. So if we look at that, of horses, by the way, is a very short prepositional phrase. And remember, a prepositional phrase can never, ever, 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 ever have the subject. So herd, read it without the prepositional phrase. The herd gallop wildly. No, that doesn't make any sense. The herd gallops wildly. So if we take out the prepositional phrase, we can figure out what the verb should be, what tense we should use for the verb. So the herd of horses gallops wildly across the field because herd is singular. It is a collective noun. Now, there have been many hurricanes this year, or there has been. Many is the word we need to look at here, not hurricanes, okay? I know it's weird, but many is the word. So would you say there has been many? No, it would be have. There have been many. Okay, the woman with all the cats, blank here regularly. Again, with all the cats is a prepositional phrase. So we know cat, even though cats is plural, cats cannot be the subject. Who's doing the shopping? Remember, the subject is the thing that is attached to the verb. The cats aren't shopping. The woman is shopping. So we know that the woman is doing the action, therefore the woman is the subject of that verb. So it would be the woman shops here regularly. Again, read it without the prepositional phrase and it'll make sense. The woman with all the cats shops here regularly because the cats aren't doing the shopping. They might want to, but I guess I suppose you can take them if it's like PetSmart or something. You can take them there, but you get the point. Okay, so the next one. The mascot as well as the hockey players blank at the school. So who's doing the volunteering here? The hockey players or the mascot? The way the sentence is phrased. Now this is an appositive phrase right here. And a positive phrase is just additional information to give more detail and I guess you could add context to the sentence, but it's not necessary for the sentence. Anytime there's an appositive phrase in a sentence, you can remove it and you still have a complete sentence. So let's read it without the appositive, without the highlighted phrase. The mascot blank at the school. So that's easy to figure out. The mascot volunteers at the school, not the mascot volunteer at the school. But because we have that additional information in there in the form of an appositive phrase, it can cause confusion. The mascot, as well as the hockey players, volunteers at the school. That sounds odd because of hockey players being right before the verb, but it's correct. Now, if we switch it around and we make the mascot part the subject or the part of the appositive phrase, then it changes it. If we read the hockey players as well as the mascot volunteer at the school. I know that may sound confusing, but that's how it works. It always goes back to the real subject. Now, an appositive phrase can't have the subject in it because it's just additional information. It's just additional details to give context. Now here, as well as the hockey players, is an important piece of information, I think, because it does give context. If it just said the mascot volunteers at the school, people are like, mascot for what? Is that little lizard from the Geico commercials? Is it, I don't know, Freddie the Falcon? Although he might be volunteering for something soon because he might not have a job. I don't know how much they pay him, but anyway, that joke, by the way. But it gives context because it could be a mascot for anything. So now at least we know, as well as the hockey players, at least we know it's the mascot for a hockey team. Well, we could be more specific and say the mascot as well as the Boston Bruins players, then we know we're talking about a specific NHL hockey team. But that's it. Now, if this is what's called a compound subject. This is something I don't believe I've even talked about this semester. This is a compound subject where you have two things that are working simultaneously to be a singular subject for the sentence. The hockey players and the mascot blank at the school. In this case, it would be volunteer. So when you have a compound subject, you treat it as plural because it's one subject, but it's multiple elements. So in this case, and notice that there's no comma because the hockey players and the mascot are acting as one unit. Therefore, there is no comma. Where they're not separate clauses. They are part of the same independent clause. This whole sentence right here is one independent clause. No commas. There's nothing dependent here. The hockey players and the mascot are acting in unison. Therefore, the hockey players and the mascot volunteer at the school. Because we know it's plural. There's a bunch of players plus a mascot. All right. Now, this one is just odd, but it is possible. So I put it in here. Well, I made these up. I didn't put anything in. This one is a very odd sentence, but it's grammatically correct, and I'm doing it just as an example. So we have the hockey players or the mascot. Again, no comma, because this is an either-or situation. The hockey players or the mascot volunteers at the school. Because it's one or the other. They're not all doing it. It's either going to be the hockey players or it's going to be the mascot, not both. The one above it, they're both doing it. They're all doing it. In this case, it's either the hockey players or the mascot. So in this case, it would be volunteers. The hockey players or the mascot volunteers at the school. And the reason that we say volunteers in this case, with compound subjects, if one is plural and the other subject is singular, you go with the one that is closest in proximity to the verb. I know this is weird, but if we said the mascot or the hockey players, it would be volunteer, not volunteers, because hockey players is plural and it's closest to that verb. But since I have hockey players first and mascot second, in other words, closest to the verb, mascot is the determining factor. Mascot is singular, therefore it would be volunteers. Everybody got that? I hope that wasn't too confusing. So anyway, that's a real quick rundown of how subject-verb agreement works. If you have a singular subject, you need a singular verb. If you have a plural subject, you need a plural verb. That's very straightforward, but I do understand when you throw in prepositional phrases that may have plural nouns in them. Remember, not the subjects, but plural nouns. And that plural noun is closer to the verb than the actual subject, and the subject is singular, I completely understand how that causes confusion. But just read the sentence carefully that you write if you see a prepositional phrase. Like this one. Of horses is a prepositional phrase. So we know that our verb cannot be plural because herd is singular. The herd gallops. Horses can't be the subject because it's of horses. Keep all that in mind when you're reading through your essays. Now, one last thing I'm going to say before signing off here is a lot of these mistakes like this can be, you're more likely to notice them is if when you're proofreading your essays and you're doing your editing, your final editing before submitting, if you read them out loud so you can hear what they sound like. It's not 100%, no, not even close, but you are far more likely to hear that something might not just sound right if you hear how it actually sounds. If you're reading it to yourself and just pronouncing it in your head, there's a tendency for you to autocorrect when you're reading in silence. B, if you don't actually physically hear what it sounds like, you're less likely to recognize that something's just not right with that sentence. Now, you may not know immediately, right off the bat, but think about it like, like you're Spider-Man or something. If you read it out loud and something just doesn't sound right, that's like your spidey sense tingling, you may not be able to put your finger on exactly what it is, but at least you'll know right off that, hey, something doesn't quite sound right about that. look at it closer, read it slower, read it out loud, read it word for word, and you go, oh, okay, yeah, I've got a singular subject and a plural verb. No wonder it sounds weird. Or even if you can't articulate it like, oh, this is conjugated, forget all that fancy stuff. If you say, hey, this word should not sound right. This word doesn't sound right with this word next to it. Read it without the S on the end or something if it's a verb. If you read it, because most singular verbs have an S and the plurals don't or whatever, read it both with different forms of the same verb, and you might go, oh, okay. And especially with linking verbs like is and was and were, different forms of that, because I see stuff like where people say they was going to the store. No, that should be they were going to the store. Or they is going to the store. No, that should be they are. Read them out loud. Hear what it sounds like, and you're more likely, but significantly more likely, to figure out that just something doesn't sound right. Read some alternatives. Change the form of the verb and go, oh, yeah, that's it. And you'll get it. And there's no real shortcut to any of this. It's just practice and recognition. And believe it or not, English, in many cases, subject verb especially, can be boiled down to simple pattern recognition. And sometimes that just doesn't sound right is every bit as good of a reason to take a second look at it and figure out why it doesn't sound right than if you can sit there and say, well, the first blah, 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 and read it and just name the problem like you're reading from some sort of grammar textbook. I'm not expecting y'all to do that. If it just doesn't sound right, probably a good idea to give it a second look. And I think that's where I'm going to stop for today, and I will just pick up with the next video. Another reminder, all revisions for Essay 3 are due by the 5th. If you haven't turned anything in, please get me something. Whatever you get me is going to be a final draft, but a final draft is a lot better than no draft. All right, so just keep pushing forward, y'all. It's November 2nd or 3rd by the time y'all are watching this. The semester ends on the 16th, and everything ends on the 23rd. For this, that's the end of finals week is on November 23rd. So it's right around the corner. Don't give up. Keep your heads up and keep doing what you're doing. And I'll see y'all next time.